Hey, good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are watching this today. Welcome back to another Bible study. Pastor Mark here, Wednesday. Today is August 31st. It's a beautiful day here. I hope you are having a beautiful day as well. We're just going to dive right into the Bible study today, and I'm filming this a little later in the day than I like to, but I've been going back and forth a little bit as to what exactly to cover, always trying to be prayerfully minded. But we're going to study from Acts chapter 19 today. And some of you are probably thinking, oh, the first 7 or 8 verses, Acts chapter 19, maybe another day. But today, we're going to start with verse 11. And then we're going to skip down and do a few more. We're not going to read all of the verses here, but I hope that you are blessed. And I'm mindful of the time, so let's get right into it. So Acts chapter 19, verse 11 through 12. I'm just going to read these two verses. I'm reading from the New King James Version right now. Now God worked unusual miracles by the hands of Paul, so that even handkerchiefs or aprons were brought from his body to the sick, and the diseases left them, and the evil spirits went out of them. Now let's pause right there. Wow, isn't that something? So we're going to have to infer a few things here. Of handkerchiefs, so perhaps people were bringing cloths like a handkerchief. Paul's wearing it in his pocket or on his person and preaching or whatever, praying, and then they take it to the sick and they recovered. It's really spectacular. But we are going to skip down from there to verse 23. Now, some of you may be aware, sorry, I just had something bite me on the corner of my eye, it felt like. Some of you might be aware, and some of you perhaps not, that the early church was referred to in the time that they lived as the way. And you read this a number of times, especially in the book of Acts, Luke writing about the actions of the first church and the apostles in particular. And it's called the way. And verse 23 says, and about that time there arose a great commotion about the way. So there's a commotion in the city. This city is Ephesus, by the way. You learn that early in the chapter, and you learn it here in the following following verses. Sorry. The way. And so there's a commotion coming about in the city about the way. Well, Paul has been there. We find that out. Where is it? I thought it was 2 years. Sorry. It is. It says here in this chapter at one point that Paul was here ministering in the city of Ephesus for about 2 years. Anyway, so lots going on. Verse 23, the great commotion about the way. And a man named Demetrius, now he is not in the church, he's in the city of Ephesus, and he is a silversmith. We see that in verse 24. He's a silversmith, and it says that he made silver shrines of Diana. And selling these things made a profit, not a small profit, it says, to the craftsmen that were making these little idols of Diana, the Greek or Roman god Diana. And he calls the other craftsmen in the city together for a meeting. And he says, hey, this and these folks are spreading this news about Jesus Christ. They're wrecking our business. Now I've summarized that and said it in my own words, but that's essentially what it is. And he says, verse 27, so not only is this trade of ours in danger of falling into disrepute, but also the temple of the great goddess Diana may be despised and her magnificence destroyed. Now when they heard this, verse 28, they were full of anger and wrath, and they started crying out, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." So here we are in Ephesus. And they spilled out of wherever they're having their meeting, and the whole town is filled with confusion as these people are running around the town screaming, "Great is the goddess, great is Diana of the Ephesians." And so in verse 29, the city is filled with confusion, and everybody runs into this theater. And on the way, they seized two of Paul's travel companions, Gaius and Aristarchus, and they're hauling them into the theater. And picture it like a large outdoor amphitheater. Literally, that's what it was. But it was actually very, very large. I don't know how many thousands of people could fit in there, but it was large. The ruins of it are still present today, and it's in modern day Turkey, and it's big. So having said that, Paul hears about it, and he wants to go in to the other disciples, but they're not going to let him. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't go in there. Now, skipping down here, verse 33, the crowd draws another person named Alexander. This is a disciple, member of the church, and he is Jewish, as were a lot of the early church. And says, verse 33, and they drew Alexander out of the multitude. So there's the mob. Someone's like, get this guy, get this guy. And they're putting him forward, and Alexander is motioning with his hand, trying to silence quite the crowd so he can make a defense. But when they found out, when it was mumbled through the crowd that he's Jewish, all with one voice, it says in verse 34, they cried out. You're going to love this. For about 2 hours. Just let that sink in. For a span of approximately 2 hours, these people shouted, quote, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians," end quote. And they just kept shouting it. They just kept shouting it for about 2 hours. Folks, that's nuts. And verse 35, when the city clerk is there, and they are finally quiet the crowd down. It's taken a couple of hours. Men of Ephesus, what man is there who does not know that the city of the Ephesians is temple of the great goddess Diana? So the clerk is asking them, who doesn't know that? In that era, in that time, apparently that was well known. Verse 36, therefore, since these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rashly. He brought these men here, this is verse 37, who are neither robbers of temples nor blasphemers of your goddess. Therefore, if Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a case against anyone, the courts are open, and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. And he goes on ending this madness. He says in verse 40, for we are in danger of being called in question for today's uproar, there being no reason which we may give to account for this disorderly gathering. And then he dismissed the assembly. Paul and the other disciples and the apostles were spreading the gospel so effectively in that region of the world that the people who made the idols, and that was their income, their source of income, were feeling the loss of their income. Their income was being pinched because people were no longer buying their idols. They were being converted. They were being added to the church, and they were no longer worshiping false gods. Wow. Now, Paul really wanted to get in there. If you read this chapter, he really wanted to get in that assembly and be able to make his case. In other places where he was in similar situations, he always took advantage to share the gospel. No doubt, in my mind, he was wanting to do the same thing. Here he's got the entire, or most of the city assembled. Here's a great chance to reach somebody we haven't yet reached. But the madness and the sheer madness that this was, and the levels of crazy that this had reached, was probably very dangerous for him. But he wouldn't have cared, because he's not ashamed of the gospel. Very interesting to me, the viewpoint that the people who were making the idols and selling them to the idol worshippers were complaining that their income was being affected negatively because of these Christians and this teaching of Jesus Christ, and people turning away in large numbers from idol worship. That's making an impact. That's reaching your world. It's one thing to read the Gospels and read the Acts of the Apostles and the letters to the churches, the epistles, book of Romans through the book of Jude, really, and then part of Revelation, and see that, yeah, there's churches, there's names, there's people, but to see the viewpoint from the other side, how effective the church was at reaching out. Folks, I gotta tell you, we need to become more effective at reaching out. And you might say, oh, but Pastor Mark, I'm not qualified to talk about the dichotomy between the God-man Jesus, and he's all deity yet he's human. No, you don't have to do that. You just need to share with somebody what Jesus did for you. Just share your testimony. Invite them to church if you'd like. If you want to have a Bible study in your home and you don't feel comfortable teaching it, myself, Pastor Howie, Senior Pastor Justice, we're available. If you want to open your home and invite your friends, we'll be happy to come and teach those Bible studies. But we need to be more effective in reaching our world. The silversmiths were rebelling because the effectiveness of the church reaching out to the lost was impacting their income. That's something I hadn't quite thought of in that context before, and I hope that it's a blessing to you. Well, God bless you. Think about ways you can be more effective in sharing the gospel or sharing your faith with someone. And again, you don't have to break down and give a whole statement or what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, you don't have to break down all kinds of doctrinal positions in the Bible. You'll bore them to death if you want to do that. Just share what the Lord did for you. That will open a door, and then invite them to church. Invite them to a Bible study. Amen. God bless you. I hope you're having a great evening. Let's continue to pray for our church. We're going to get a new location. I trust and believe it. 10:30 at the Hilton, TRU, True. Again this week, 72nd and Grover-ish, right behind the scooters off 72nd Street, is the Hilton True. Main floor, the large conference room. We'll see you then. God bless you. Have a great evening.